Okay, welcome back everybody. This is Jim Grisanzio here at the Groundbreakers Live in Singapore at Oracle OpenWorld Singapore. And I'm really happy here because I'm actually now with Simon Nicholson.
Jim, good afternoon.
Simon is an old friend of mine from Sun way back in 2002, 3 or something like
2000
that.
and mumble.
Yeah, exactly, a long time ago. Back when I met you then, you were working on Java and XML and standards, and we did a lot of web services work. I was in marketing and PR at the time.
I remember.
And we had a lot of really good times back then. And then I went off onto Open Solaris, and you went off onto something.
I went into embedded.
Okay. So now, what are you doing now, all these years later?
So right now, I'm part of the IoT development and blockchain apps development organization at Oracle.
All right, you are actually the senior director of product management there, right?
That's what I'm doing, yes. I'm responsible for product management, and in many ways linked to what I was doing way back all those years ago, which is looking at how we actually link up, or how we see innovation happen in the broader community, and then how you surface that in ways that can actually deliver value. I mean, Sun was very much about an enterprise story. Oracle's about an enterprise story, so it's a consistent theme. And if you think about things like what I was doing then around EBXML or Liberty Alliance and Identity or XML or Java, all of those things are still very pertinent, still very relevant. It's just they have new context now. They have, they have new purpose, or the knowledge gained then has, into the current time.
So I noticed that you're doing a talk here, or actually you already did a talk, right? And you're also running the personalized manufacturing demo over here as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And that's always very popular. There's a whole huge crowd over there all the time.
Well, everybody always gets to walk away with a freebie.
Yeah, so what is personalized manufacturing?
So one of the challenges a lot of manufacturing companies are facing right now is how do they get closer to the customer? If you think about cars, increasingly, you can design what seat fabric, what pattern of fabric, what configuration of car, what paint job, what trim, etc. And all of that you can do online on an app, and then that goes up to the manufacturer, and they effectively build a car for you. I mean, obviously, if you go into the very, very high-end cars like the Bentleys and the Rolls, that's how it's worked for some time, except without the web app. But now, increasingly, folks are trying to drive that down. And if you look at recently, Unilever, I think it was, purchased a company called the Dollar Shave Club, which is a direct-to-consumer subscription shaving service. I think they spent like $1 billion on that. And you think, why did they do that? And what they're looking to do as a manufacturer is get much, much closer to the consumer and understand what the consumer wants. So what we're showing with personalized manufacturing is how do we take something like a standard wooden coaster, something on which you'd stand a drink, and we have a set variety of wood types and patterns, and then the customer walks up, the participant walks up, and they type in their name, and then we run it through a manufacturing process live on the show floor here, where we pick the right coaster up automatically and put it on a conveyor belt and then move it under a laser burner, and the laser burner will then etch their name and the time and the date onto that coaster, and we quality check it, and then pop, out comes their own coaster, their own memory, their own unique memory of that particular moment of their visit to this event. Wow. And what's happening in background is all of that is being choreographed and managed by a combination of the Oracle supply chain services, SaaS services, combined with what we're doing with IoT. So we're doing things like using digital twin and digital thread and AI within those capabilities to actually manage that entire process. So in real time, we're taking all that real-time data and providing insights back to the people running that process, the manufacturing company.
So talk more about the complexity here of these systems. I mean, because these IoT devices, there's just an innumerable number of these things out. How are we handling security? How are we handling just the scale, the mind-numbing scale of this?
Well, the question mark is more about, first of all, what do you want to get out of it? Because all too often, we've seen this, is that folks will start off with an innovation project by looking at the technology and the sensors and the communications protocols. Is it LoRa, is it Wi-Fi, is it Bluetooth, etc. And never necessarily get to a point where they understand what ROI they're trying to achieve out of this. So increasingly what's important is start by defining what your business outcome is. I want to reduce carbon footprint by 15%. I want to increase the number of times that if an engineer goes out to a customer and can fix that particular piece of kit first time. So start with that end, then think about how that's going to impact your enterprise, because there's customer service systems, there's ERP systems, supply chain systems, all of that capability. And then from that work backwards, and eventually you'll reach the edge node, the edge of it, where you're looking at the devices, where you're looking at the communications protocols. Our focus is making sure that all communications into inbound, outbound, with the cloud is secure, reliable. Obviously scales. I mean, Oracle's pretty much understands scale.
Yeah.
So that's part of the value prop, if you will, of the underlying infrastructure within the cloud. And then, it's down to the customer. The customer brings their own device model, they brings their own data model, and then we can pull from that and ingest and process and deliver that value, deliver against the outcome that we defined in the first place.
Interesting. Okay, so we've been here all day today. We'll be here all day tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
You've already done a session. You're again running this demo over here. There's been a lot of activity. Can you share with me some of the conversations you've been having with people? In other words, what's the sense of the developers here in terms of what you're hearing? And so in terms like maybe like maybe the session you had, any kind of a Q&A or any kind of a Q&A over here?
One of the questions is to what degree do I need to build it from the ground up myself? Because one of the challenges with innovation out in the broader space, often starts with some folks coming up with some really clever ideas, and then there'll be various initiatives that spawn off the back of that, open source projects and more. But when you're saying, right, I now want to, as a developer, I now want to actually take that intellect, those ideas, and actually expose them in something that actually generates return, whether it be for the company I'm working for or a company I'm seeking to provide value into. How do I reduce the time to value? Because I can spend, I've seen plenty of examples of folks who've taken innovation and have spent months building something from the ground up that eventually generates a project that, technically and intellectually looks quite interesting, but when it's taken to their sponsor, maybe the line of business sponsor or whomever, you get that slightly puzzled look on their face of not quite getting it here. Where's the value? Right. So one of the questions we often get is, how quickly can I bring these pieces together so I don't have to worry about the security and the scalability? That's a given. So I can focus on where the real value is in terms of how I actually deploy it, how do I tune it to the use case that the customer's actually looking to realize. That's perhaps one of the most recurrent questions. How much of it can I take for granted, such that I can then add value in the upper levels of the deployment rather than sort of down in the sort of core plumbing.
Now, are you working mostly with customers these days or developers as well?
A combination of the both. I mean, for every time there's a customer, there's going to be a development team that come with them. Yeah. And it's very much about that intersection between the line of business, the business users, and the development team. So it's like talking to both the COO and the CIO together, because there are things that the COO wants to do from what they want to achieve as a business, and then the sort of the IT CIO side of the business will say, yes, but we need to get ticks in boxes for the following, we need to get assurances against the following criteria. Right.
Now, are you still based in the UK?
I still live in the UK.
You still live
Yes, that's true. I live in the UK. Here I am in Singapore. Yes.
And I also saw you in Dubai.
You saw me in Dubai, and you were in London, and
so do you get around to like all the Oracle events, or do you go to industry conferences as well?
Yeah, I do industry conferences as well. Next week I'll be in Hanover, where we have the world's largest industrial fair, Hanover Messe, which I think is like 250,000 attendees over 5 days.
250,000?
Yeah, 250,000.
Slightly larger than here.
It's a city. I've been a couple of times. And there the focus is very much around supply chain. It's around sort of bringing together one of the great things about IoT, one of the sort of key things that we're focusing on is forgive it, but it's IoTification of your business. And it's not just about IoT, Internet of Things, but it's also how you bring together the operational technology and the information technology and bring them together. It's having a factory floor or a set of assets out in the field, or a bunch of workers running around a building site, a set of workers constructing a new build, whatever. How do you bring the information that they're generating and bring that to bear within the enterprise? So next week's very much that sort of theme and focus.
Interesting. Do you have a sense from different regions in the world in terms of how things are different or the same around the world? In other words, is IoT sort of being implemented in the same way around the world in different regions, or are there distinct flavors?
No, there are differences. I mean, without wanting to sort of overly generalize, I think you start to see, certainly in this part of the world, in APAC, there's often a sort of drive to having a sort of more of a ready-made, joined-up proposition that's available as a single source. Whereas maybe if you move west from here into Europe and then further west into North America, there's a greater readiness to take piece parts, and often the customer want to bring it together themselves. That's a horrific generalization, I admit. But there is that slight difference, and also you see different levels of interest against different segments around the world. Often driven by, for example, we see a lot of activity at the moment around construction and connected worker in oil and gas, etc., in the Middle East. Whereas maybe in other parts of the world where you've got strong manufacturing bases, you'll see a lot more interest around production monitoring and how do we enable what's going on inside the factory or factories, and that sort of smart connected factory notion, Industry 4.0. Very much to the fore.
Cool. Okay. Well, I know you have a meeting coming up,
I
won't actually keep you anymore. Thank you very much.
It was
great to
see you.
Really
Thank
a pleasure.
you very much.
I've been trying to get this guy for a couple of conferences now, and I got him because he's
thanks
right
for your
over here.
patience.
And so thank you very much, Simon. I appreciate it. And any questions on IoT or personalized manufacturing, just over here to the right. And Simon Nicholson is your guy. Thanks, guys. We'll be back with one more interview for the day.
Thanks
See you
very
later.
much.
Bye-bye.